outside of the door. So
It's Pisa.
you can imagine how tall
It's sort of shaped like Pisa.
Russia is Moscow.
Oh, yes, the Moscow Cathedral.
This cathedral was rebuilt in 21st
Jesus
century.
Christ the
It was
Saviour.
destroyed
Oh, this thing, that's the one which was a swimming pool.
Yeah, so that's all
beginning of
really
the 20th
recently
century.
been
Redone.
It was a swimming pool.
done from
Open
photos, yeah.
swimming pool for people of the Soviet Union. And right now it's rebuilt. It has a huge...
So with this video,
size.
you guys is going through somebody's photos on their
Doors are still
blog.
the same.
And he's
Yeah,
like doing a voice, like commenting on,
yeah.
on
Not edited like a.
not like edited like a film.
Yeah.
Almost ancient. You say in Germany, you can see this. It's huge doors. It says sand.
So his point is the doors are not for all people.
Well, what his point is, why would you build a door that's just so massive and then cut a little hole in it?
Saint Anastasia.
And then they
open the whole door and
This is the Santa Maria Church in Del Pino, Spain, Barcelona.
I think
And this is the entrance.
What's
to
your
the,
email, Lorenzo?
Lorenzo at mefsip.org. Laurenzo
Jerusalem Church of
at
God's girlfriend, whatever you
MEFSET.
say. This is the ancient painting of the banquet of Cleopatra. And Seneca was
He's just going through some blog for an hour.
yeah.
dust. They digged it out.
Oh, this is
Dug it out.
this is then the fallen, the unfinished.
Oh my God!
What?
Bunch of big-
Ewan Murphy has nicked this from Shaughnessy. I've been given a gift of your painting. Shaughnessy bought that for 200 quid.
Yes.
Why is he giving it to you and Murphy?
Maybe he is on the favour, boy. The boy was passed between. As a part payment.
Can I discuss with you a potential commission maybe then?
Great.
Hopefully in the summer. Said as much, hence was offered it. What does that mean?
Oh, he liked it, so he was offered it.
What about Nick then? Is he going to hang his portrait in the...
Yes. So he's just got a house in France, I think, which is probably good to him. Somewhere in the country. Let's go and see it.
Yeah.
And paint something in situ, maybe a fresco.
I hope you're not upset. Well, I'm just confused why Nick would give that away after having had it. I suppose he got bored of it. I'm sure Nick told him it's Ignatiev, Minister of Tsarist Education.
Interesting.
And his ancestors live in Canada.
Mefsut.org. MEFSUT.org.
Yes.
Right, yeah. Have you found that?
What's an acolyte in this case?
His slave boy.
Slave boy. So I wrote, they told my dad that if he wants to be seen, he has to call 111 and explain that he has symptoms, and then he will be put in the room with other coronavirus victims and then tried and tested for coronavirus, which is a death sentence, basically. So instead, he
If anyone actually has it, rather than just some paranoia.
yeah. But anyway, my dad went home instead of doing that, and
That's wise.
can you believe that hospitals are so shite that my dad felt fever again, and the GP received him and said he has no COVID symptoms, but couldn't explain the fever, so they gave him a directed letter from the for the hospital, and he and Mum went by taxi to Watford Hospital yesterday, where they were told that as of today, computer says no, and they won't be. Quarantinis, yeah. And there's no
This is quite amusing.
They won't be diagnosed, and the letter is invalid as the doctor has no own right to send you to hospital as of today. So 70 quid for taxis, and
To say nothing.
to a potential waiting room for infected patients, and help. And Giles said, your dad recovers, but yeah. So did Ibrahim Douglas.
Douglas. Douglas Maximus.
Yeah. Now that Alona is saying that she can apply for a visa. Well, we'll see what happens then. I thought that she couldn't. So if you sent that to me by email, then Ollie.
Yeah.
Oh, great. It's on YouTube.
No.
What have you sent me by YouTube?
Oh, this is a live feed.
So this is the live. Yeah. So, this is the live feed. Can you see? So this is what.
Yes. So there's a few seconds of delay. And it's going to do
Yeah. So it's feeding back because it's in here.
4 bits. 4 bits. 4 bits.
So you have that.
Yes.
This is great fun. Nice.
Hey.
Red.
You look like what's his face? So we can have a conversation,
Yes.
and it's good audio. I mean, if you put headphones on, there's some headphones here.
Hold on. I switched it off. I'm trying to find my video that you sent me.
Put these on. Have a listen. See how it sounds.
Okay.
Does it have a? Oh, that one has a headphone jack. Oh, it's lost.
And then there's a. We can have a still of How is that? So. There we go. There's me in the corner.
Yes.
There's you.
Ah, I see. So picture in picture.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
We can do.
And you can fly in and out of the corners.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And then we can have this camera, and so we can also put a third person using a laptop could bring up images that we were talking about. Or whoever
yes.
was talking about.
Yeah, I'll take a picture for
And then
young
we've got a mobile
Dan.
camera. Look. So you want to do?
So at the moment, it's just 2 people watching.
So
Can you hear it? Is it loud and clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. It's not distorted or weird or anything.
No.
Okay. Great.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Good. So there's me. There's Lorenzo. There's the handheld camera.
okay.
We got a massive feedback situation. We can do. We can get a picture. I'll get a picture in here, which hang on. Fade to black, all that business.
Yeah.
We can get a still to use as yeah. So if you press the still button, you can get. I'm going to load a still in. It'll take me a minute to figure this out, but we can do that.
I like the little button panel. That's quite cool.
It's weird watching and hearing.
Oh, on a time lag.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome
Time
to the Lorenzo
lag,
Meth
time
Show.
lag.
So,
Hello.
so we can have any graphic, for the pausing.
It appears.
And back to
Yes.
I feel
etc.
slightly paranoid in here. I don't know if I'm in reality or
The next
slightly
level.
set back in time.
Yeah. So this is the situation,
Oh,
and
and
so
then-
this is
Like
now
swimming
this is all going out
underwater.
live onto the internet,
Yes.
and so you share this link on.
Yes.
We could share it on your Facebook now if you want to see.
Yes.
We can get the people. We can get people to answer questions. People can send questions to the internet here.
Phone in. Yeah.
So it's streaming. So there's live chat on it. So you can get.
Do you have
Is
the link?
coronavirus real?
Oh,
Oh, you want the answer?
Yes.
Oh, well, it's a weaponized disease. It came out of the lab of Wuhan.
Blah 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 blah.
I'm going to share this link with
Yeah, send
So
it to
according
me.
to Lorenzo, who is the be all and end all of knowledge,
Yeah, the
he
local
has knowledge coming out of every
epidemiologist.
orifice.
Our resident epidemiologist.
Our resident Buddha who knows all things,
Or at least gives the appearance of that.
who will answer any question, especially when he doesn't know the answer, in a confusing but convincing way. So how much is 3 + 2?
It depends where you're standing, I suppose.
Sorry?
It depends where you're standing, I suppose.
I expect we'll start getting some questions any minute now that we can answer.
And can I switch this off for a second?
Well, yeah.
Just send me the link. I want to find the link.
Okay, so have you sent me another email? WeTransfer, here we go. So get your file. Brave.
Dan, are you watching? It looks like Dan James is watching. Dan James, are you watching this? If you are, send us a question. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I should really download this on my laptop, shouldn't I? Rather than my phone.
Yeah. If you don't
Dan James, ask us a question on the
Send
send us a question. Dan, send us a question on the Dan, send us a question on YouTube and then we can see yeah. Yes. Then we can see what you want to ask.
Can you pass me the link
Come
for
on.
the for this feed?
It's on the email.
I've got the sound, but not the picture here. What is that?
Why is the screen blank?
Yeah.
Right, Dan James, this is what you have to do. You have to press the link and it'll pop up in YouTube and then you can watch it. Then you can watch the live feed of me and Lorenzo.
Hello.
I'm just gonna check this on my Lorenzo.
Hello.
I'm just gonna check this on my Lorenzo.
Right. That's quite clever.
Come on, Dan. Ask us a question. Oh, Dan. Here we go. Who's your top fan? Okay, Dan, we've got Dan James's thing here. Hello, Dan. Who is your top fan? We know who's the top fan, Lorenzo. Who's our top fan? It's Dan James.
Apparently it's Dan James. Hey, Dan. Number
Oh,
one
hello,
fan.
John Fowler's in. John Fowler's
Oh,
on
here we
board.
go.
Fucking Mauler. Okay, John Fowler, are you on coronavirus lockdown yet? John Fowler is a friend of mine from a long time ago, and he's very busy being ill with.
Yes.
Here we go.
My friend has just witnessed a fist fight at a pharmacy. She says,
Who's this?
Where's the...
Who's that? Who's... Oh, right. Someone's... Right, Nelkin is a gimp. That's good, isn't it?
You get your mask
We've
out.
got 4 people watching.
Yes? It's
Oh,
it's
John
in the
Fowler
corner
says he
of the-
faked his boy's cough to get 2 weeks paid leave.
All announced live on YouTube.
There we go. This
Yay.
is going out live to the internet, John Fowler. And Dan James says he feels a bit weird, but not being able to say anything. What does that mean, Dan? Oh, Dan James feels a bit weird not being able to say anything.
So
Well, say something then, Dan. Say something. Say something to Lorenzo and Ollie.
this is a lot of fun, actually. We can make a lot of use of this, I think. Well done, Oliver. This is a real piece of tech.
Yeah. Oh,
It's feels very self-referential with all of these cameras.
Yeah, it's
extremely self-referential.
it's a big deal. We've got 5 people watching.
Oh,
5
great.
people watching.
Okay, well,
this
we
show.
should entertain them. So apparently there's been a fist fight in a pharmacy in Canary Wharf. A stout black lady and a neurotic Italian apparently are having a fist fight.
Is that happening as we speak?
Happening live in a pharmacy.
Is it as live as this?
It maybe not quite as live as this,
Oh, wow.
but in a pharmacy in Canary Wharf, there are fist fights breaking out, as I've been informed.
So that is breaking
source.
news. That's breaking news. That's happening.
There's now
now
a bouncer on the door. Let's send this link to our reporters in the field.
Oh right, who's in the field? Who's in the field at the moment?
So Natasha is in the field. She's been at Canary Wharf today.
Remember to share this on your social media feeds, everybody. This is the new show business called. What's it called? New Athens.
The New Athens live stream.
Live stream.
In association with Mornington Media.
That's right. Produced by Mornington Media. That's my fucking company. So what have you been up to today? Have you been isolating yourself?
I've
Lorenzo?
been wrestling with the delivery systems of supermarkets. There are no home deliveries in Hertfordshire between now and the 3rd of April, which I was quite astonished at. Tesco and Sainsbury's and other supermarkets have no deliveries available at any time in their app system in rural Hertfordshire. But it seems, hello there. It seems that Asda do, but only on the 3rd of April. So April Fool to you, if you want groceries.
April Fools indeed. That sounds like coronavirus is really taking over the situation.
So a good
if you
friend
want,
of mine
it depends
was,
how seriously you're taking the health risk, Peter.
a good friend of mine was telling me yesterday. He was informed by a senior member of the Tesco staff that they'd been informed by the British government that the British government might be nationalising or taking over the Tesco supply chain infrastructure in the near future to provide groceries. It's very interesting what's going on right now. If you're following the British economy, because what we're seeing is almost a stripping back of the entire
just a moment
consumer
there,
economy.
just hold that thought. Lorenzo, Dan James has just said in E17, no Sainsbury's deliveries for 3 weeks.
Yes, April the 3rd in Hertfordshire, with Asda.
Just introducing Pete Curry, who's the latest guest on the show.
Hello, Pete. Welcome to the New Athens live stream in association with Mornington Media.
It's me. Anyway, Lorenzo, tell us what you were saying about food.
What's going to be quite intriguing in this period is how
5 people are watching.
Really, that's great. I'll just send this out actually, live into the internet. Our first live stream and the link.
Oliver loves a long bath check from Matron. Thank you, John Fowler. That's an interesting insight. It's true as well. I'm quite keen on that sort of thing. What about you, P? Are you keen on bath checks? What's your
What is a bath check?
What is a bath check indeed? John Fowler, do you reckon you can give us an explanation of a bath check on the well, I'll tell you while we're waiting for John's response. A bath check is when you've had a bath and you need to be checked to see how clean you are, to make sure you've had a bath properly.
Who's doing the checking?
Matron.
What if you don't have matron to hand?
Well, then
Does she always know where you are?
Well, then
after
you'll
you
never
drop
know
the
if
bar?
you're truly clean or not.
Oh my gosh. Matron comes to you, does she?
Well, you have to
When
present
you hear the
yourself
knock,
to
knock,
Matron.
knock, that's
No,
matron
no.
at the door.
No, unless Matron's not going to come and find you. You got to go and find Matron. Otherwise, it's your problem for not
Right.
having passed your bath check.
Oh my gosh. When was this a thing?
In the past, but I think it still happens.
I don't think do people have baths anymore?
You tell him, Ollie. I'm telling him, John. I'm telling him about the bath check.
Is this a memory of your halcyon days together in the bath?
Not together in the bath.
Oh, okay. Just a bath policy was
it was a bath-
instituted.
A bathing policy that was
Yeah.
instituted in an institution.
Were you there of your own will or not?
When were you institutionalized?
Well,
When did you stop beating your wife?
yeah. I don't know. Well, I don't know, John. I helped Ollie. Oh yeah, John Fowler helped me helped Ollie fail his A levels.
Oh,
John Fowler didn't even take any A levels. He took
respect, John Fowler.
GMVQ. GMVQ. Didn't even pass that. He probably did pass that. Anyway, what do you think about GMVQ, Peter?
I don't even know what that is.
Generally not very quick.
There's no card in camera. Does it still work?
Doesn't need a card.
Oh, I'm live still.
Yes, it's still and ever. We're never going to be leaving.
This is a 24-hour live stream.
This is
It's
as long as we can physically sit here.
We just need a chef to keep us going. We'll live stream.
Is that why you've brought me in?
That's right. We need someone to. We need a matron.
Is there some cooking to do?
There's someone in the bath in the kitchen. And
Which one is the black magic camera? Is that C100?
That one is.
Oh,
That's
that's-
the C100.
Oh, I'm on black. Am I on Black Magic?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Black magic camera.
Well, I'm very interested in this Black
C100.
Magic scenario.
Oh, Dan James. Latest update from Dan James. This
Yes.
is Tesco 24-hour stores are closing early from tonight.
Wow.
Really? Closing early? What time?
What time,
Dan.
Dan James? What time are the Tesco stores closing? Oh, here we go. Dan James says this feels like a government starting a slow curfew via closing supermarkets at night. A slow curfew.
Yes. Well, what's very interesting is that you can see with authoritarian nations like Iran and China that they were able to do lockdown very quickly because they had all of the laws, all the statutory instruments there already to impose a lockdown on their populations. Italy as well, although they sort of failed to deal with the oncoming wave of the coronavirus. On their books, they were a fascist country in the 1920s to the 1940s, and so the Carabinieri on street corners is both a cultural memory and also a memory in the law, in the process. So they could quite quickly turn to martial law within their polity. Of course, they've entirely failed to then contain the disease in Lombardy, and now the whole of Italy has an outbreak, which combines sort of both the fascist memory of Italian legal and political history with incompetence and overreaching in terms of their ambition to contain the virus. But in common law jurisdictions like Britain and America, you're going to see a lot of issues with giving orders to civilian populations that literally don't have the law in place in a common law framework to do anything more than recommend or inform the population as to what they may choose to do, which is why you're not seeing the forced closures of venues or the forced imposition of curfews.
It's all been politely asked, hasn't it? It's like
Yes.
it's been suggested.
We'd request or we'd recommend, and so you can hear that in the terminology used in these briefings.
What do you think about that, Pete? Are you? What do you think about the authoritarian versions of China versus the British thing so far?
It's interesting. I'm not convinced the British government is not capable of cracking down on I think they're much more capable of enforcing curfews and quarantines.
I have a legal expert who is a good friend of mine who is now commenting on our discussion. Who's saying Britain also has the power to impose lockdown with the 1984 Act. Funny that it's an act from 1984. It gives the PM extensive powers. Courts will respect it, and all the recommendations so far are a political choice, not a legal one. Well, I'd be keen to see how it proceeds, and whether it can proceed through the courts. Certainly.
Good to know, Lorenzo. Good to know.
Mm.
Just a point of information. Now, I mean, it's interesting to talk about coronavirus, but we've also got an audience to cater to.
Mm.
And La 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 has just now. Don't take this personally, Lorenzo, but La 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 has just said Lorenzo is a boring man.
At least I'm a man. I mean that's a good start, I suppose. I mean, in an era when we don't know who anybody really is.
I think what they're suggesting is you sex it up a bit, Lorenzo.
Okay.
You get a bit more fruity. You get a bit more.
Okay.
So
So we're burning off. I mean, we've burnt off the consumer economy in this country. What's going to be left? I mean, we're going to have medical services. We're going to have transport. We're going to have some infrastructure. But nobody's going to go to restaurants. Nobody's going to go to bars. Nobody's going to do tourism anymore or travel. So what are we going to be seeing in the near future that is left after the plague time is
well, yeah, on that point, Lorenzo, on that point, DCR James has just mentioned, he says, you don't think it's to do with, one, doing it gradually to avoid sudden change, two, encouraging companies to do it themselves so as to avoid government/insurance liability?
Yes. Well, we've noticed over the past day this debate about whether the government is requesting the people who go to pubs and restaurants not to go to avoid the terms of the insurance policies that those places have, that they have to be forced to close to get the payout. But then airlines are getting that reserve because the Foreign Office today recommended that there should be no non-essential travel abroad, which is that's the break clause on travel insurance contracts, where if the Foreign Office says that you don't travel in a non-essential purpose, then you can get your money back from your cancelled trips.
Good, interesting. That makes sense. Another question here from John Fowler. Oliver, what is a mandingo and can they catch COVID-19?
Well, I think it's a question for you, Ollie.
I don't know. Maybe John Fowler can help us with that answer. Maybe he can help. What is COVID-19? That's the next question from Nelkin is a Gimp.
There's an account specially created to.
What is COVID-19?
I'm now in the live chat.
That's a question for the Gimp.
That's a question for the Gimp.
That's you.
It's me. Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. What's COVID-19? Well, COVID-19, it's a coronavirus. It's one of the many coronaviruses, I think. I'm literally an armchair epidemiologist. COVID-19 is
well, you're a sofa epidemiologist and I'm an armchair epidemiologist.
Came from a bat. A man ate a bat, didn't cook it properly, and now we've got this crazy cold and it's sweeping through the country, and that's why all the shops have closed. Well, the pubs nothing's closed yet. It's just everyone's going under because there's going to be big knock-on economic effects from a man eating a bat. Who'd have thought it?
It's not the bat. That was a cover story. I mean, there are interesting videos that come out of the Wuhan food market where you see, boa constrictors being chopped up and blood everywhere. They're very arresting images.
Is it like the man who shagged a monkey to make AIDS?
But that's a cover story, and actually that was put by the Soviet Union into a paper in India, which was their vector for introducing propaganda into the West in the kind of 80s. They put out that story, apparently, according to Nick O'Shaughnessy, who you can see in a documentary that we just made on the New Athens channel. That was an interesting discussion, but nevertheless, in Wuhan there's a level 4 super lab, which in China has been studying COVID diseases and coronaviruses. We know that because in the Lancet and in various other medical and scientific journals, there were job ads for over the past year for postdocs to come from the West to the Wuhan Super Lab to study these diseases. Now,
Let's read these out. In a minute.
will it have been will it have been contracted from eating a bat in a fish market, or in the same city will it come from the super lab that is sitting there? And the one of the professors at this laboratory was advertising for jobs for people to come and work on studying these diseases, which is more likely.
That is all interesting. There's a couple more questions here, Lorenzo. Yeah. Okay, number one, we've answered what COVID-19 is. We've answered what COVID-19 is reasonably well, I think. I don't know anything about it. Next one is it true you're offering your flat for spice heads to self-isolate in?
Oh, are we cuckooing? Like, I think we're cuckooing now.
Are we cuckooing?
I think we're cuckooing in the flat. I think although we're maybe not selling spice, but we're certainly cuckooing. It's an interesting
what is the verb
phenomenon.
Cuckoo? What is cuckooing?
So cuckooing is when a drug dealer takes over a house with the person still living in the house, and then starts selling drugs out of that house. And I think it was just actually made specifically illegal recently, because I think what they were saying was that, I'm just a lodger in this house and I happen to have taken it over from the person. But it was generally a phenomenon of people who were quite infirm, who were targeted by drug dealers and had their houses taken over.
Okay. There's another question here, Lorenzo. Let's see.
Okay.
So insurance liability. Yeah, it's the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect.
Yes. I thought that was
James,
quite
the butterfly effect.
Sorry, I lost. What's the butterfly effect?
Ask
This
it again.
camera is horrible. Don't just use. What is the butterfly effect?
What is the butterfly effect? Bats don't have feathers.
No, they don't. Nor do butterflies.
Bats. I thought it was disease to spread of bats because they're sort of similar to humans, but not really.
So I was very interested the other day. I was listening to Joe Rogan, who had on an epidemiologist.
Johnny Webb. Who's Johnny Webb?
He's a friend of mine who has a YouTube channel.
Right, Johnny.
Hey, Johnny, how are you?
Hi, Johnny.
The other day, Joe Rogan on his podcast had an epidemiologist whose name escapes me right now. It was a very intriguing discussion. And what was Joe's thing called?
Another question for you, Peter. This is a question for you, Peter.
For me.
The question for Peter is: any links to the Wuhan Super Lab adverts placed for postdoc research? No. That's not
yes, I do. I do have actually. I've got a couple of.
Did China? Here's a
so
real
the
question.
the name of the
China
epidemiologist on Joe Rogan was Michael Osterholm. It's a very good. I'll put the link to that in the chat now,
Okay.
and also the links to there's. I'll take you through some. God, I lost that thing.
Did China release COVID-19 to get a leg up in the financial markets after losing trade deals with the US?
No, so I mean, Ish has asked. Oh, hello, Ish. How are you? Any links to the Wuhan Super Lab adverts placed for postdoc research? Yeah, I'm just putting them in now. There's two very interesting.
Are you reading the questions off YouTube?
Yeah.
Right, we're in business. We're in business. We're off and running.
Yeah, no. So
share it. Share this video with all your friends.
Hedge?
It's very important. This is beginning. This is a very
do
important video.
share.
Share this around the internet.
live
We want to
and
spread it.
continue to be live.
Like COVID-19
I
over the
really
internet.
would share it to us.
Oh,
I'm just sick.
Peter doesn't want it to be shared. He's
Yeah.
not vain enough.
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
Peter!
So, Ish, I'm just putting the links in the chat now.
We've got some other questions on the other situation. Give him no, don't give him knob to mouth resuscitation. Ask you if you can suck his Wuhan. No. I cannot think of a more boring topic, says Johnny Morris. I hope someone is wanking in the background just to normalise it all. Peter,
Okay, I
get
don't
busy.
think. No, that didn't work.
That should get some viewers.
Yeah, so the first link is here. I don't know if you can I can't copy out of this.
What do you think about all this, Peter?
The conspiracy channel or
All of this.
just My first question is why?
Why? What? COVID-19?
No, absolutely not. I want to hear any more about COVID-19.
Okay, what do you want to hear about?
Why are you doing this to your lovely living room? It was so beautiful once, and now it's been
There's only so long you can sit in the living room without.
before it turns into a live studio.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And all
it's
your friends hop on.
If you've got the technology, you should give it a go.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's quite fun.
it's great. Well, I don't know why. Can you see the links I'm posting to the chat? Is there a reason why the chat won't post links?
I don't know. DCR James says, man eats bat in China, shops shut in UK equals the butterfly effect.
Okay.
So there are two.
Closer.
So there are two articles on Zero Hedge. One is called "The Real Umbrella Corp: Wuhan Ultra Biohazard Lab was studying the world's most dangerous pathogens," and the second one was "Is this the man behind the global coronavirus pandemic?" So in the first, which was the 29th of January, I saw this the 29th of January this year, gives well, I just read it. In the light of growing speculation, most of it within less than official circles, that the official theory for the spread of coronavirus epidemic, namely because someone ate bat super to Wuhan seafood and animal market, is a fabricated farce, and that the real reason behind the viral spread is because of a weaponized version of the coronavirus, one which may have originally been obtained from Canada, was released by Wuhan's Institute of Virology, accidentally or not, a top level 4 biohazard lab which was studying the world's most dangerous pathogens. Perhaps it would be a good idea for the same Wuhan Institute of Virology to remove the following help wanted notice posted on November the 18th, 2019, so only a couple of months ago, according to which the Institute is seeking to hire 1 or 2 postdoc fellows who will use, quote, bats to research the molecular mechanism that allows Ebola and SARS-associated coronaviruses to lie dormant for a long time without causing diseases. The right candidate will, now you could still get this job potentially, the right candidate will, 1, have obtained or is about to obtain a PhD in life science or biomedical related fields, 2, have a reliable and rigorous work style with strong independent scientific researchability and teamwork spirit, 3, have strong English communication and writing skills, have research papers published in the international mainstream academic journals, and 4, have a cell biology, immunology, genomics, and other relevant background experience preferred. The full job posting, which can still be found on the Wuhan Institute of Virology website, can be found here and screen grabbed below, as it will be gone in a few hours. And then they translated it of the same. Why is this notable? Because as it turns out, this is a job posting for the lab of Dr. Peng Zhu, PhD, a researcher at the Wuhan Institute of Virology and leader of the bat virus infection and immunization group. Some more on Zhu's background from the institute was translated from Google. He received his PhD in Wuhan Virus Research Institute in 2010 and has worked on bat virus and immunology in Australia and Singapore. In 2009, he took the lead in starting the research on the immune mechanism of bat long-term carrying and transmitting virus in the world. So far, he has published more than 30 SCI articles, including the first and corresponding authors Nature, Cell, Host Microbe, and PNAS. At present, research on bat virus and immunology is continuing, and it has received support from the
We're
National
losing audiences, Lorenzo.
Ukraine Fund. Okay, so essentially, as Nick said in our documentary the other day, which you can find on the New Athens YouTube channel, every propaganda lie needs or works often very well, if not best, when there's a grain of truth there. So yes, it is about bats and it is about bat immunology, but it's not about somebody eating a bat in a market. It's about what was going on in the lab in the same town, which was the study of bat immunology and how it relates to humans. Now, when Michael Osterholm appeared on Joe Rogan the other day, I was really interested to note what he said. He was talking about chronic wasting disease, which is a disease in cervids, in deer, in the Americas. And it's a really rampant disease. It's a prion disease like BSE and CJD, so it eats away at the brain. And it's called chronic wasting disease, CWS. You can look it up. It's affecting elk and kind of deer populations across America, and it's coming. The US sort of authorities are concerned that because hunters are hunting deer and eating the flesh, that they will be exposing this chronic wasting disease to the human biome, and potentially it will make the leap as BSE did with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans. in the 80s, and of course prion diseases have these long incubation periods, which obscure the fact that it's come into the human population for a very long time. Now, Michael Osterholm, when he appeared on Joe Rogan, said something that I thought was really intriguing, which was that humanized mice were being very badly affected by the
Humanized mice. What the hell is a
so a
humanized
humanized mouse? Apparently, I didn't know what a humanized mouse was until he then explained what it was, which was a mouse whose genome has been edited and his biome inside the body has been changed so that it's more like the inside of a human body. Now, I didn't know what this was, but it did strike me when he said it that his concern was American hunters were by eating these deer, which may be contaminated with the prions of chronic wasting disease, CWD, would be exposing the disease to more human contact, which means it might jump to humans. But in his lab in the University of Minnesota, they're already doing this because they're exposing the disease to humanized mice, which seems like it might also then allow the disease to spread that way. So, I mean, what you're seeing here, really, what it alerted me to was this idea that almost a cure for a disease and a bioweapon are two sides of the same coin. Like when you're developing a cure for a disease, you're also developing a way to weaponize that disease.
Got a question here from James Carson.
Hmm.
Have you got coronavirus or are you racist?
It's a bit of a weird question.
About deer. Is this about deer or mice?
Is it about deer or mice, James? What do you think, Pete?
It doesn't make any sense.
Sorry, carry on, Lorenzo.
Yeah, so that was quite intriguing that that you have these weaponized mice, humanized mice, weaponized mice.
Humanized mouse. Sorry, just run through what a humanized mouse is again.
So it's a mouse whose genome and whose internal structure has been genetically modified to be more like a human. So then they can do tests on the mice.
Is it a human with a mouse's willy?
Yeah, with an ear. There's a human with a mouse's ear growing out of its back.
That's a humanized mouse.
No, I think that may be one of the outcomes was growing ears.
Right, okay.
So I think that image, and then you think about testing on animals, medicines, diseases, and so on, and they're trying to make them as human as possible, so they can model how those diseases will work in humans. If anybody has any insight into humanized mice and the weaponization of diseases, then that would be. Or has watched Michael Osterholm on Joe Rogan the other day. It was a really fascinating examination of corona.
James Ellis has asked us to let us know when you get off that chat.
Okay, well, if we have any suggestions of other,
we need more suggestions.
If we have other topics,
we need more questions. You ask the questions. If it's going on, just write a question onto YouTube, and we will answer the question. And the more questions we get, the more what's it called? The more brevity there will be in this.
Yes,
in our answers.
Absolutely,
we can waffle all day.
Yeah, we're here until we
we're here until we fuck off.
Yes, or get coronaed.
Yeah, we're gonna. This is it. This is it now. This is the bunker.
Yes,
it's
the last stand.
This is all we left of humanity. Me, Pete, and Lorenzo talking about coronavirus.
It's mainly Lorenzo talking about coronavirus.
It is mainly Lorenzo talking
about. I've just been doing a lot of research today, and it's really fascinated me. But then maybe it's a topic that's kind of done to death. The economic consequences of coronavirus are also quite stimulating. So what is going to be left after all consumer businesses die, apart from Amazon and possibly supermarkets? Yeah, if people aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, all the bars are closing down, which means that the people who work in bars won't get paid, which means that they won't pay the rent, which means that the landlords won't get the rent money, which means that they won't be spending that money in bars.
Yeah, that's how the economy works. It's very good.
Um,
But yeah, I don't exactly know what happened after the 1918 flu pandemic, but I'm sure that would be the place to start if you want to know what's going to happen to the economy.
yeah, what is going to happen? Oh, I
So
don't know,
do you 2000
the Roaring Twenties happened, didn't it? Flappers.
Yeah, I don't think that was a time of.
That was before. Wait, we talk
Roaring
about
20s
we
was
talk
after
about
the
Spanish flu. Yes. Yeah. So I saw actually the other day on Carl Benjamin's channel. He was interviewing. No, it wasn't Carl Benjamin's channel. It was an interview with Peter Hitchens on YouTube the other day.
Peter?
I'll find the link later.
Oh, sorry.
Hitchens.
And he was saying that the genetics of the First World War were very interesting because actually a lot of families were completely. Hello, Philip. Welcome, Philip Fiersov, to the first New Athens live stream event in association with Mornington Media.
You got any questions, Philip?
What are we talking about?
I was
Good question.
just talking about an interview I saw with Peter Hitchens the other day on YouTube, where he was saying that actually the genetics of the First World War were very interesting. Because a lot of young men died who didn't have children, and their whole family lines were cut off.
Yes.
Which had been maturing for hundreds or thousands of years. And then you had all these family lines suddenly cut off without kids because of because of bombing, because of machine guns and so on.
Yes.
In the very early years of the war, when they all volunteered to participate, and so then the people who were left behind after that war, you had all of the flower of youth cut down, all the Wilfred Owens and Rupert Brooks,
Sassoon.
and Sassoons cut down by machine guns, mustard
Vidal.
gas, and
Not quite. That's Siegfried, a German who became a British officer.
yeah, and became a poet. So all these war poets.
Sassoon was German.
Yeah.
That is a scoop. That they didn't teach you that in GCSE English.
Well, they kind of did, but it wasn't made a point of. But I think the point is the tragedy of both sides, and in fact, all of the other sides as well. The poetry is talking about also a completely closed class system. And of course, we've all grown up in parallel while studying this at school with this Blackadder series, which of course is a comedy and a black comedy at that. And with that, what we get is a parody with Baldric and sort of officer class people. But it's kind of topsy-turvy the way it's presented in the comedy film, because in actual fact, the officers were often the educated people that wrote the poems, and not only wrote the poems, that died on the front line much more so than is given credit in the comedy film. So this distorts the vision that the officers were in fact having a lovely time while the working classes were dying. And I think the tragedy was that there wasn't enough in terms of weapons and supplies for anyone in the First World War. And in fact, they were always quite inexperienced. And as a result of kind of a lot of mess ups, a lot of people died without having any chance, regardless of their class. Whether it be gas attacks or shells and all the choirs of wailing shells and all the machine gun fire, obviously the new technology that was involved with the Maxim gun that had been painted in London and then sent off to different countries. So recently I was talking to a German friend of mine who came over to see Edinburgh, and they phoned me up with my sister asking what they should see. And I said, well, you should go up on the hill and look at this monument to Gallipoli, which is a copy of the Parthenon on the hill. And it commemorates the fall of many young Scottish and other Anzac troops who were sent to from Scotland and from New Zealand to Gallipoli in Turkey, and mowed down by English patented but sold by Germans Maxim guns that were completely ruthless and impossible to stop while landing on the shores. So all of that is the tragedy of war, and it carried on. And of course, if you look at the Russian front, the Eastern Front in the First World War, it's quite notorious that just like in the Second, a lot more people were sent to die without weapons, and they'd have to wait in a queue sort of to see who would get guns and be able to use them up against terrible technologies. Yeah.
Does it matter? Does it matter losing your legs? For people will always be kind, and you need not show that you mind when others come in after hunting to gobble their muffins and eggs. Does it matter losing your sight? There's such splendid work for the blind, and people will always be kind. As you sit on the terrace remembering and turning your face to the light, do they matter, those dreams in the pit? You can drink and forget and be glad, and people won't say that you're mad, for they know that you fought for your country, and no one will worry a bit.
Now, of course, this led to revolution in Russia, and subsequently Russia leaving the First World War, and people turning on the officers, which is sort of immortalized by filmmakers like Eisenstein with films like Strike and Battleship Potemkin. And of course, I'm sure the authorities in Britain were incredibly worried that poetry like this could lead to rebellion.
I mean, actually, we hear a lot in the history of the First World War as if they were all, patriots who just swallowed the jingoistic nonsense of their imperial overlords and fought and died.
Kitchener.
Your country needs you. But Sassoon made, I've just found here, in the Times newspaper of the 31st of July 1917, he made a public statement of defiance. Quote, "I am making this statement as an act of willful defiance of military authority, because I believe the war is being deliberately prolonged by those who have the power to end it. I am a soldier, convinced that I'm acting on behalf of soldiers. I believe that this war, upon which I entered as a war of defense and liberation, has now become a war of aggression and conquest. I believe that the purposes for which I and my fellow soldiers entered upon this war should have been so clearly stated as to have made it impossible to change them, and that, had this been done, the objects which actuated us would now be attainable by negotiation. I have seen and endured the suffering of the troops, and I can no longer be a party to prolong these sufferings for ends which I believe to be evil and unjust. I am not protesting against the conduct of the war, but against the political errors and insincerities for which the fighting men are being sacrificed. On behalf of those who are suffering now, I make this protest against the deception which is being practiced on them. I also believe that I may help to destroy the callous complacence with which the majority of these at home regard the continuance of agonies which they do not share, and which they have not sufficient imagination to realize." And this letter, published by Sassoon, a war hero who won the military medal, caused a minor furore, and questions were asked in the House of Parliament about it. You see, you don't get that kind of notion that there was a debate, internal debate.
In 1993, the novel by Sebastian Faulks, Birdsong, which we also had to study at school in parallel, which was really a revisiting of these issues much, much later, talks about a young soldier and his fight in the front line in Amiens. And, obviously recently people have been going to the battlefields in Normandy. Our friend Joshua went to report on the graveyards, and I met him over in the service at Notre Dame just recently before it burnt down. And he was talking about Amiens, and of course, because of the recent politics with one of the French politicians being from there, of course. But I went to Amiens myself by car about 4 years ago, and I looked at the cathedral and the fields as I was driving through, and some of the other half-finished cathedrals and things that were left intact after this aftermath. And what struck me was that we're talking about a territory that was so easy to cross. I mean, really just flat land, easily dug trenches with a lot of effort, but really a territory that was always so easily traversable by military forces.
Yeah, they just roll through, whether it's Napoleon or...
Yeah, I mean, it's just the opposite of the English Channel, where, it's such a precarious thing.
Crossing, it never happens, yeah.
But this novel was very well written by Faulks. It was almost like a period movie, a meta-historical question was asked about what would it be like to experience the First World War, and it was sort of later on the radio adaptation on television in 2012. But it is striking how 4 years of my GCSE and A-level was all about that. So really people's vision of France and Germany and the war was very much dominated by war literature. And they were really trying to hone in this point that war was terribly futile and that it was a tragic end to young lives and great prospects for people.
I have a response here from a friend of the show, Mehul, who says, interesting, the practice of quarantine as we know it began during the 14th century in an effort to protect coastal cities from plague epidemics. This practice, called quarantine, was derived from the Italian words quaranta giorni,
40 days, yeah.
the period which ships had to wait before docking at the port. Okay, that's intriguing. Did you know that?
Yes, I'd heard that before. And so in a lot of these stories of the First World War, they talk about waiting. Really, even in the film with Baldrick and the rest of these sort of comedians, what they're really talking about is the hopelessness of waiting to hurry up and die and sort of trying to make coffee out of mud and dandruff and the rest of it. And sort of how do you spend your days and then suddenly be called up to stand, with your head over the top and run over the top. And of course, war has changed in many ways. Before that, it was very different as well. But still, the essential thing, I would pass that over to you, Ollie, because you have obviously been to war in a more recent experience.
What was the question?
So
Sorry,
what is it like to experience war today?
Stressful, boring, and then stressful, but then boring again.
So waiting around is part of the game, really. Isn't it?
It's all of it. But I was a REMF, a rear echelon motherfucker. And although we did go outside driving to forward operating bases in convoys with lots of IEDs around, and lots of vehicles did get destroyed. So it's just generally stressful. It's just a very stressful situation, and you need to piss a lot because you can't get out of your vehicle.
I recently was reading The Art of War, this Chinese ancient book.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, and that was mentioning quite often how surprise attacks and the element of surprise and the striking first was the greatest thing to do for a general, in a way to work out how to do warfare that could be proxy warfare, that could be using the enemy's resources and pouncing on the enemy when they least expect it and when they can't defend themselves. And so the strategy of generals in, for example, Napoleonic battles in Austerlitz and the rest of it were things like destroying bridges or surrounding river crossings and things like that.
So that's why the British Army was defeated in the American Revolution, because they would wear red uniforms with a big white cross over their heart, so that snipers from behind dry stone walls and tree stumps with their long rifles, the farmers and yeomen of the 13 colonies,
Phil speaking, press 1.
could
I see.
Press it
now.
Yeah, there we go. Then you can press it and then change the.
So camouflage.
Yes, camouflaged coonskin capped farmers from Massachusetts were able to destroy the greatest army on earth because they had the lay of the land, they knew the territory, and they could strike with surprise. Of course, they couldn't win in pitched battles.
So camouflage. What is camouflage? It's artists who develop different khaki patterns.
Yes.
And use geometry and repetitive spangling and speckling that they could confuse visually air raiders and bombers from the sky.
So it was the American Revolution. It was the last time fancy uniforms were worn in battle, because then there was this idea of rifling. So So the rifle was developed with the kind of screw thread inside the barrel, which allowed more accurate shot, rather than muskets, which kind of you fire kind of wildly toward, and the big plume of smoke comes up in your face, so you can't really see where you're going. In fact, the Prussian army was quite puzzled about why it was in the 18th century they didn't really kill anyone when they had ranks of men facing one another in squares, the classical,
the carré,
classical warfare squares in a pitched battle with people, ranks of men firing muskets at one another. And so they decided to do a test. They got a really long cloth about 6 foot tall to mimic the height of a man, and they strung it between 2 trees and had the soldiers, conscripts these were, fire their muskets at the cloth to see, well, where are the shots going? Are they, why are people not just falling dead when you have a volley of musket fire? And what they realized was that conscripts about 60% of the time fire in the air, because they don't like the idea of killing anyone. So they want to appear to the officers and to their fellow men that they're participating in the activity, but actually they're not violent by nature, and so don't want to even have the opportunity to kill somebody.
Shoot to kill.
So they'll shoot, up in a way that looks, to the people around them like they're participating in the activity, but actually then they know that they're not going to kill anyone.
So all this sort of smoke going on, and of course the terrible crime that Napoleon committed by shooting the enemy officers, which was kind of portrayed in the TV series about his biography, in that he broke the rules of chivalry, a medieval code that said that if you recognized an officer on horseback or in the way that they were dressed, you wouldn't fire on them. And then, of course, it shows how he was so successful, because Napoleon, being a short and stocky man in a dark coat, put a young officer in wonderful gold epaulets
Florid
in front
uniform,
of him.
yes.
And subsequently, because he had been shooting the officers, the enemy started shooting his French officers. And of course, they didn't aim for him because he was a short and stocky man that stood right beside the brightly dressed young officer who died.
Yes. Camouflage then became important, and you saw that again in the American Civil War, where officers did try to wear fancy clothes, and then they then unified the blue uniforms for the Union, and then grey uniforms for the Confederacy, often made by the same people. Nick was telling us, different colours of the same factories.
It's a bit like the Turkish army and the Bulgarians working for the Turkish army, changing the colour of the Janissaries to grey, because they knew that this was a way of being less conspicuous.
So in the American Civil War, they got the idea of uniforms without decoration, but the officers were on horseback and then got picked off by snipers as from an even further distance. From hundreds of yards, you could have then a sniper with rifling in their rifle, which would mean that they could pick off an officer off his horse, and so they'd know which ones they were because they were on the horses, even though they were in the same clothing. So of course, then they learned, with a lot of attrition, that actually, people need to be totally uniform, and that's where the concept.
Well, in the Russian army, the color was really green, and this was mimicking Frederick II, and it was Paul I who changed the color of the Russian uniform back to green, which was very offensive because they'd just been fighting the Germans. But of course, the Russian army had a lot of mercenaries in it who were German. And Peter III, who also loved Frederick so much that he had green uniforms, which of course, green fitting very well into the grass and the trees around them in the environment of the fir forests and this kind of thing.
But then again, you see with these 18th century, early 19th century uniforms, the bandoliers and the big cross, the white cross over on the chest, which marks out where to snipe.
Incredibly bright, yes.
Yes. To just to make it easy for them. It's interesting how war became a less and less formalized affair. It started off being something like ritual combat, and it became total war later.
With the machine, yeah. And in terms of the extradition, or the, how would you call it, the closing away of people, the other word that comes to mind is Lazarus. And of course, Lazarus sounds like a biblical word, but what Lazarus were these towers where people could be kept in total quarantine because they might be
Lepers.
sick. Yeah, Lazarus.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lazar, leper. Yeah,
is that the meaning of the word?
I think so.
Lazar is a leper. Yeah. So the situation today is that we're being suggested by governments to be Lazarus.
Yes.
People to
Yes.
stay in Lazarus, to ostracize. Another word that's quite interesting because it comes from the Russian word ostrov, which means island.
Yes.
So to ostracize or isolate yourself.
Yes. Which is, again, literally isolate is to put on an island, an
Yeah.
isola. So yes, this idea of rejection from society. If you look at ostracism, well, I mean that was an ancient Athenian practice.
Mm-hmm.
So in the democracy of ancient Athens,
Nisos is the island in Greek, isn't it?
yes, in ancient Athens, if a man became too rich or too powerful in the democratic state, he was ostracized, which would mean that he was banished into exile from the city for 10 years.
Like Ovid or Socrates.
So Socrates had a death sentence, and Socrates was a bitch about it. And the death sentence in ancient Athens meant, please go away, but go somewhere else.
So it didn't mean killing you.
It doesn't mean killing you, but Socrates wanted to make a point, and so made them kill him, or rather made them make him
go through with it.
Suicide. So what his friends wanted was, and you can read this in the apology. His friends all said, okay, well, when you get a death sentence in Athens, it means you go to Corinth and you hang out in Corinth, and we'll go and set up your school in Corinth for you. He said, no, I'm an Athenian, I want to die here. And just to make a point, when actually a death sentence was optional in Athens. It just meant, please leave. We don't want to
conscription in a way is a sort of death sentence, and that's the way that my father saw it when he went to madhouse and pretended to be a schizophrenic successfully to avoid military service. And of course that was the time of the Russian campaign in Afghanistan, and I subsequently was taken to England to be kept away from this sure death in Chechen wars and Georgian wars and the rest of it in the last few decades. So I had to avoid Russia for 13 years just to not be conscripted. Although I personally have flat feet, so I would have probably been in the reserve army because I wouldn't have had to fight on the front line, being unable to run away, which is kind of tragically ironic because, I mean, if you're up against terrible weapons, then surely it doesn't matter whether you're fit or not because the weapons override your physical abilities. And I think that I've watched films like Barry Lyndon, which show how somebody goes into armies and changes sides and everything else, and then sort of never wants to descend from rank of gentleman again, as Kubrick put it.
Yes, it's a great movie.
And Thackeray book.
Yes, it really shows. It really shows, yes, quite how.
Well, the old man who gives his life for him as well, and
which is quite how chaotic life is before, the sort of rationalization of the Industrial Revolution, and now with CCTV, fingerprinting, all these smartphone surveillance. We live in an age where everything we do is tracked and traced. But you could even change sides in a war before the Industrial Revolution, and
well, you can serve in any army.
And nobody would
necessarily
know unless somebody recognized you. You could, if you think your way into the past, you can start to see how the assumptions we make about the uniformity of life really didn't apply. If you can just turn a corner and be a different person and go somewhere and not be known.
But the situation in France and the situation with the total lockdown, where you can even get a fine apparently for being seen in public and going out on the streets anywhere except for the shops.
We were talking about this when you were out of the room, that because China and Iran are authoritarian regimes. Italy has a memory of fascism, in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And so it has on its books all the laws to put the carabinieri on street corners, have people carry papers, and prove who they are.
And face recognition technology now as well.
Yes, although I'm not sure they've turned that on in sort of rural Lombardy, but nevertheless, the idea of being regulated by the police in a civilian setting is something that formerly fascist countries can certainly have both as cultural memory, and they have the statutory instruments actually to do, to institute very quickly. Whereas someone like here or America, which has common law basis, with free men on the land and the ability not to be interfered with by the law unless you're breaking a statute, means that it'd be much harder to do that kind of lockdown where show your papers. We don't have to carry papers in this country.
So it doesn't matter whether it's a federal government or indeed royal land, a kind of constitutional monarchy.
So, I mean, the constitutional monarchy sits on top of the common law, which is, how we've existed since time immemorial in this country. And so actually all those statutes only apply if you're breaking one of them, whereas normally you don't have to treat with the law. The law can leave you alone to get on with your day in Britain. So the theory goes. Anyway, hello.
Hi, Lorenzo. Hi, Phil.
How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Phil. Very well. I think what we've done is we've proved the concept here, whatever the concept is.
Yes.
Well, we've got 2 viewers so far.
Oh, right. Well, we had 15 at one point.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Most of
people
them
got
I
bored.
need to get my knob out, but apart from that, it was.
Well, I'm sorry this is not rehearsed. I mean, we're really just whittering on here, but I think we've covered a few points. The tragedy of war, the tragedy of medicine, the tragedy of the law.
Tragedy of medicine.
Yes, and the tragedy of conscription, and sort of the tragedies that surround us and
there
surrounded
like a-
our predecessors.
Yeah.
So if that's good, we can
I think we've
Call it a day there.
We've done what we came to do.
Thank you very much. That's all from me, Lorenzo Mefsit, founder of the New Athens. And this was our first live stream. Thank you to Ollie and to Phil for
by
such
ya.
a fascinating discussion.
righty ho. So how do we
Uh,
stop
Put it
the?
on. Put it on me.
How do you do that?
That's our producer, Ollie Alkin of
La
Multimedia.
di da. Until the
Let's
fat
finish
lady
first off.
sings. Yeah.
Catch you next time.
That Pete, he got 5 from History Fit.
History shit. Oh no.
You got fired, did you?
No, he didn't.
I left.
You left because of the coronavirus.
Yeah.
Is it because they offered it to you on a
There's
plate?
no longer history. We're at the end of history.
Yeah.
Francis Fukuyama has won, ladies and gentlemen.